Hi, and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about meltdowns because I experienced one yesterday. So while that's fresh on my mind, I thought I wanted to talk about how meltdowns affect me and what happens for me, and then we can go over some tips and we'll talk about what's the difference between a meltdown and a tantrum coming up. First of all, what is a meltdown? Well, it's an episode of losing control over your own behavior and emotions, and it can happen to adults also with autism. Usually there's something that triggers it. Meltdowns for some can include shouting, throwing things, not being able to communicate or tell others what's wrong, going mute. I think it really can differ from person to person. Crying, screaming, locking your bedroom door so no one can come in.
Tina, open the door. Now what's the problem?
Turn that thing off.
It's not recording.
Yes, it is.
No, it's not recording.
Is that the red button on?
I definitely used to do that, and my dad would always say he was going to get the screwdriver and take the doorknob off if I didn't open the door, which was not what I needed to hear at that time. But he didn't know that I had autism either. When you are going through a meltdown, you are having very intense emotions, and it just feels like the end of the world in the moment. It does. It's hard to control our behavior. We recognize we're in a meltdown, but we're just too far into it to be able to help ourselves, it feels like. The difference between a tantrum and a meltdown is a tantrum, usually someone is trying to get something out of a situation by displaying a certain behavior, like you see in toddlers when they're throwing a meltdown because they want their parents to do something or give them something. A meltdown is not like that. There's no intent on getting something out of the situation. The person going through the meltdown doesn't want to be going through the meltdown, and it's hard emotionally on that person. Meltdowns can last for minutes, hours, days for some people. Meltdowns cannot be controlled and can be very frustrating for the person experiencing them, and even embarrassing. As an adult, we shouldn't be embarrassed, but we do feel embarrassed because we feel like we're an adult. We're supposed to have control of our emotions, so we feel like we're going crazy, and it's just not the case. There's no need to beat ourselves up over it. And as adults, we can get to that point where we know ourselves, where we try to avoid meltdowns to the best of our abilities. We come up with our own strategies, but it doesn't always work. It depends on how stressful the situation is or how many stressful situations we've been in that can build up to a big meltdown or burnout. I think the biggest burnout I can remember in the last few years is when I worked as a social worker, and I was getting to a point where I couldn't handle it, but I felt like I couldn't communicate that to my boss. The other social workers, I didn't have any close friends I felt like I could talk to, so I just internalized everything, and it kept getting worse and worse, and was having like panic attacks. And so I ended up just walking out of the building, quitting my job that way. I talked to no one. I picked up all my stuff and I walked out the building, and that's how I quit my job. So they were very confused as to what happened. They didn't even know anything was wrong with me. And they were calling me and trying to figure out what happened, and I didn't even know what happened, and all I knew is I couldn't do it anymore. The workload was getting stressful, and I didn't know why I couldn't handle it, because the other people that worked there were able to handle it, but it was very hard. I felt like that's the biggest burnout, meltdown I ever had in my life. And for years, I just explained it to myself as I had a panic attack and then I had a breakdown. over the past few years, I've had several small meltdowns pretty often where I'm able to get over them in either from a few minutes or at least an hour or two at the most. My worst meltdown recently was 3 or 4 months ago, about 3 months ago, when I was not able to care for my grandkids anymore. I had temporary custody of them because my daughter was not able to keep them at the time. When I was rejected, I had a huge meltdown in my car. For a couple hours, I was just banging the steering wheel and called my counselor, and I had an emergency session on the phone with her. And I was screaming and crying, and that was the worst thing I'd gone through in a while. And it made me, for a long time, afraid of rejection after that happened, because I felt like someone I loved very much rejected me and told me they didn't want to be in my life anymore, and I couldn't handle it. So since that big meltdown, I've had very small ones over the last few months. So we can use some tips for managing meltdowns in adults with autism. So number one is you need to identify the trigger. Pay attention to your mood. If you notice small changes in your emotions, be aware of that. Is there a potential situation that triggers you? Can you avoid putting yourself in that situation until a time where you feel more rested? Number two is develop coping strategies. You need to identify what works for you when you are overwhelmed. It could include getting out in nature, doing your hobby. That's a strategy I use when I am overwhelmed. It could be listening to music that calms you. It could be watching a TV show that is your favorite. Number three is we should let go of the shame. Meltdowns are a part of autism, and we cannot help it. It's okay that you experience them. It's not pleasant to experience them, but there's no reason to feel shameful or embarrassed about it at all. Number four is we can always get support. If there's somebody you can talk to, I do recommend a therapist, because having a therapist that understands autism in women has really helped me a lot. But if you don't have a therapist, maybe a life coach or a good friend who understands your diagnosis and will listen, or having another friend with autism, I think is great. All of us on the spectrum need to feel like we can have a friend who's on the spectrum who we can talk to, and on this channel I feel like I have that. And number five is take care of yourself. Make sure you are getting enough sleep, you're eating well. When we take care of ourselves, it's a better likelihood that we can try to avoid a meltdown. So make sure you're taking care of yourself. I know especially during the holidays, it's hard. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of variables we may not can control. But to the best of our ability, we need to take care of ourselves. And especially if we have families, so we can take care of others. And when we get to that point that we can't take care of ourselves, hopefully our family members that love us can take care of us back. You don't have to be Superwoman. And just so you know, here's a secret. Superwoman isn't real and doesn't exist. Nobody's Superwoman. And I would add one more tip in there. I would say if you're religious and you have a relationship with God, pray, because prayer has gotten me through a lot as an autistic woman. Relying in God to the best of my abilities, and it makes a difference. So go down there and comment if you'd like to talk about what meltdowns are like for you, how intense they get, or what do you experience. Anything I didn't mention, any tips you would like to give, go down there and comment. And also, if you like content about adults on the spectrum, go down there and subscribe, please. Would love to have you on this channel. I try to make videos weekly at least, because making videos is my hobby. And even though I work full time, I fit these videos in because it's my special interest. So if you want to be a part of my channel, I would love to have you. And thanks for being here, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye.